Hi, I'm John Ford of the American Gem Trade Association. I want to welcome everyone to the AGTA seminar on tariffs. First, I'd like to thank Krainz Creations for hosting and sponsoring this important event in New York today. We appreciate James Dimmick of Krainz Creations. He is the Chief Experience Officer. And of course, Roland Krainz, who is the Chief Executive Officer. We couldn't do this without them, and they are very supportive of AGTA, and they sponsor all our seminars outside of Tucson, which we thank them. AGTA involvement in the tariff issue was immediate after the April 2nd announcement of the sweeping tariffs affecting the jewelry industry. We consider these tariffs to be the single most critical threat to the colored gemstone industry that AGTA has ever faced. As such, the AGTA Board of Directors authorized the hiring of Washington, D.C. based lobbyist Hecht, Latham, Spencer and Associates, Inc. to represent AGTA with the goal to eliminate or mitigate the tariffs that threaten AGTA's membership. AGTA President Bruce Bridges and I have been in Washington multiple times since April 2nd, meeting with key senators, congresspersons, committee staff members of the House and Ways Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee, and members of the Trump administration. We were actually there all last week. We're seeking an end to the tariffs on loose-colored gemstones. Loose-colored gemstones are a little different than diamonds in that we're a net exporter, which actually distinguishes us from the other parts of the jewelry industry. As a result of our efforts currently, approximately a dozen personal letters from congresspersons are being sent directly to President Trump and members of his administration over the next 30 days on AGTA's behalf. We anticipate following up these letters with direct in-person meetings with the administration in September. AGTA is also working on administrative rules to be presented to Customs with members of the House of Representatives to address the supply chain issues while the tariffs are going on. And we're really hopeful that this is going to help mitigate some of the issues in the colored gemstone industry in the meantime. I want to thank all of you for attending today or watching online. The questions being asked were all submitted by AGTA members. Our goal is to provide some clarity for the entire jewelry industry today on a complex issue. If anyone in the audience has a follow-up question to a live question, just raise your hand and I'll recognize you. If you have a question that's not addressed at the end, if you will put it on the card to me, I'll ask it of the panel. And if the panel is unable to answer that question, it will be answered when the video is released in approximately a week on our website and YouTube. So please join me in welcoming a fine group of distinguished panelists. I'd like to introduce them. First, Roland Krainz, CEO of Krainz Creation, our sponsor of today's seminar. Frank Phifer, which is Senior Vice President of Hecht, Latham, Spencer and Associates, Inc. of Washington, D.C., and Noam Gerber of Malca-Amit. I'd like to read a short disclaimer. Any views or opinions made by any member of this panel, including myself, are based on the best information available as of today, July 23rd, 2025. AGTA stresses that before any action is taken on any import-export matter based on the subject matter of today's seminar, a licensed customs house broker should be consulted. In today's changing environment of tariff rules and regulations, they are all subject to change rapidly without notice. Okay, we're going to start our question and answer, and we're starting with Frank Phifer. Frank, and I'll give you a little background, as a Senior Vice President, I said, of Hecht, Latham, Spencer and Associates. We chose that firm because that firm works on both sides of the aisle. Tim Hecht and his family and the former Spencer are legends in the Republican Party with roots going back to Ronald Reagan. Frank is, I would say, probably one of the most distinguished members of the Democratic Party that works on trade issues. I'll give you a little background. Frank served on the Democratic staff of the House Ways and Means Committee from 1981 through 1997. He served as both majority and minority counsel under Congressman Sam Gibbons and as the majority International Trade Council on the Subcommittee on Trade. He served distinguishedly in the Carter administration, serving as the Associate Counsel to Vice President Walter Mondale. He is a very respected attorney and admitted to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States. So, Frank, thank you for all your help to AGTA. Frank is going to give us a brief overview of the state of play in Washington concerning tariffs. And I'm going to let him take about 5 minutes to go through this complex situation we're in as of today. Frank?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for that kind introduction. I was going to start this way and say, welcome to America First trade policy. On January 20th, President Trump issued an executive order saying that trade policy would change in America because trade policy was unfair and unbalanced, and therefore it was a national security threat. Since January 20th and then April 2nd, he developed with his Commerce Secretary, his Treasury Secretary, and his United States Trade Representative a series of tariff increases which were published on April 2nd, the so-called Trump Liberation Day, including a 10% baseline tariff, which I'm sure you all are aware of, universally. And secondly, what we call country-specific reciprocal tariffs. Those really bite because it affects the 12 or 15 source countries for loose-cuddled gemstones. As I said, Trump has claimed that bilateral trade deficits with our trading partners are unfair, hurting the U.S. economy, and therefore create an economic emergency under a statute called IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But, as you probably read every day, Trump is using these increased tariffs as leverage for many other things. For example, getting countries to increase their defense spending, abandoning laws that he doesn't like or feels that are unfair to the United States, getting more foreign direct investment, and even pressuring a country like Brazil to drop a criminal case against their former president. Now, as you probably know, there have been 2 pauses or delays in the implementation of these tariffs on the April 2nd tariffs. July 9, that came and went, and now a further extension until August 1st. Secretary Letnick of the Commerce Department said that August 1st is a hard deadline. Of course, we'll believe that when we see it. Now, you probably saw last week or two after the July 9 delay, the administration sent letters to trading partners with certain tariff rates and gave them an August 1st deadline to negotiate. Now, there have been very few bilateral agreements since that time. UK, Vietnam, Indonesia, and then last night Japan, which is, I was telling John earlier, I think this is going to be a benchmark. The US-Japan tariff arrangement that was negotiated after 8 rounds of negotiations with the chief negotiator from Tokyo is now going to be at 15%, and autos at 15%. And as you probably know, autos are a quarter of our trade with Japan. That could be a benchmark for future trade deals this summer, hopefully. On May 28th, the U.S. Court of International Trade unanimously struck down Trump's use of these tariffs, saying that he exceeded his statutory authority, so-called emergency authority, and therefore these tariffs were invalid. Of course, the Department of Justice immediately appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, and that court stayed the decision until they make a determination on appeal. That appeal is scheduled for July 31 in Washington before a full 12-judge panel. 200 congressional Democrats have filed a friend of court brief with the appeals court to support the Court of International Trade's decision throwing out his authority to impose those tariffs. No Republican lawmaker has submitted a brief yet, but that doesn't mean that the Republican Party is divided on these tariffs. But this is shaping up to be a major separation of powers claim, whether or not the president has inherent authority to set or change tariffs. Because under the Constitution, Congress has the power to regulate foreign commerce and to impose duties. And obviously there have been delegations to the executive branch over the years. However, even if the appeals court on July 31 or whenever they issue their decision throws out Trump's authority on these tariffs, they are claiming, the administration is claiming that there are other authorities they can use. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which is a threat to national security following an investigation by the Department of Commerce, and there are other authorities too. So this is going to go on all fall. That 232 authority was the basis for steel and aluminum tariffs. Now, there have been numerous bills introduced in the US Congress to reclaim congressional tariff authority. They're all appropriately named, like Prevent Tariff Abuse Act or Tariff Transparency Act. This latter bill would require retailers to disclose the portion of their product's price that are due to tariffs. We'll see if that gets enacted. On May 29th, the day after the Court of International Trade threw out the Trump tariffs, a class action lawsuit was filed in the Court of International Trade to recover tariff payments that have been made following Trump's announcement. Basically, this lawsuit is a claim against the United States for a refund of tariffs paid by importers. The proposed class is, quote, all people who paid or will pay tariffs under IEEPA imposed by the Trump challenged orders. There's a law firm that's handling that case. As to the current status of tariffs, I mentioned Japan and obviously Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines was also agreed to yesterday at 19%, I think. Vietnam's at 20%. But these very high reciprocal country-specific tariffs will go into effect August 1st unless the targeted nations can reach a trade deal with the United States before that. And I know we're all watching that carefully. Right now there's 50% on Brazil proposed, 35% on Canada, 30% on the European Union, although there's intense negotiations going on, and South Korea's at 25. And there's a lot of kind of lack of clarity, and I know we have diamond people here and they know about clarity, but there is a lot of lack of clarity in these negotiations. Trump will do a truth social, oh, we got a great deal with Japan, and then, you know, we lawyers like to say the big print gives it to you and the small print takes it away. So in the case of these agreements, you really have to look at the fine print. Are the goods for Canada and Mexico excluded that are covered by the US, Canada, and Mexico Free Trade Agreement? Probably, but not definitely. Now, the April 2nd executive order did include an annex, an addendum, number 2, which John and I have been advocating in the Congress the last month, which is exemptions for certain products. And the one that we're most interested in, and the GEM Association's most interested in, is certain critical minerals. There's a 35-page Annex 2 to April 2nd, which specifically lists critical minerals that are exempted from these tariffs, both the baseline and the reciprocals. For example, gold, silver, iridium, platinum, palladium, you name it. Goes on, tungsten, tin. We're trying to get that expanded so that our critical and important loose colored gemstones get incorporated into that. That's one of our lines of arguments in Washington to congressmen and senators and the administration, quite frankly. In addition to which, we are also asking for a specific exemption if we can't get included in the critical minerals exception, which has already been issued. So as John said earlier, the AGTA advocacy and education program, which we're very honored and privileged to be associated with and helping since April 1st, is to educate Congress and senators that loose colored gemstones are not geologically available in the United States. You know, you say that to a congressman from Virginia or New York, and you get a blank stare, or they're learning about the industry and the sector. Lack of availability, that's why the Gemstone Association, had 0 tariffs up till April 2nd. 0 tariffs on imports from the 12 or 15 countries where you source from.
Approximately 19, yeah.
19.
Yeah.
And those countries have been importing, and the association has done its great work on that. So without the availability, these tariffs become punitive and disrupt the supply chain. I'm preaching to the choir, you know all that, but this is what the education and advocacy that we're trying to do with the House and the Senate and the trade negotiators in the administration, which is an ongoing situation. So I'll just stop there and then we can talk about other pieces. So thank you, John.
Okay, that kind of gives you what's going on, the good, bad, and the ugly. A lot of it is ugly, but then we have a very well thought out argument that we are making. I sit down with people in the administration. I generally have a member of Congress or a senator with me. We actually have those people advocating for us. We have a different approach than most people lobbying. We actually have members of Congress write letters for us, not AGTA. So a lot of the questions are going to be now more complicated, more about process. So the first question will go on this item will go to Frank. And this is something that most of y'all will appreciate. We're going to talk about what mechanism exists for an overseas supplier to send in loose colored gemstones on memorandum to the United States for selection with only the goods kept subject to a tariff. Frank?
Thank you, John. We don't want to get too technical, but this really goes to the fundamental issue of supply chain and, you know, are you going to be surcharged in your business day to day? We have proposed several mechanisms to members of Congress that would allow Customs administratively, Customs and Border, CBP, to administratively address the colored gemstone import issue through memorandum or duty deferral mechanisms, deferring duties. And we can't really publicly disclose who the congressperson is, but we can give you a rough outline of how this would happen. Obviously, today, under current practice and current law, there are many duty deferral mechanisms available. Foreign trade zones, customs bonded warehouses, temporary importation under bond, so-called TIB, and Carnet, and so forth. Now, as you may know, foreign trade zones, and Roland and I were talking about this earlier, this entire building is a foreign trade zone. And I believe, Roland, your specific outfit is a foreign trade zone. And as you know, that's a designated special location that's usually technically adjacent to a port of entry or to a special customs procedure is available where you can store, assemble, manufacture, and all within that foreign trade zone without paying import duties. You can do that for an unlimited amount of time, and when you export the product, it goes out duty-free. And foreign trade zones are considered outside the customs territory of the United States. So I guess sitting here, we're outside the customs territory of the United States. which feels good. But foreign trade zones can reduce costs, improve competitiveness, and of course create jobs. Two types of zones: general purpose, which are usually at ports or industrial parks, and they accommodate multiple users, multiple companies, operators. And then there's subzones, which are approved for a specific company. And John can talk about your idea in a minute, pick up on that. But that would be for a specific purpose or for a specific manufacturing facility. I mentioned custom bonded warehouses, CBWs. They're also used for storing goods, but bonded warehouses only offer duty deferral under custom supervision and only during business hours. So they're much more limited than a foreign trade zone expansion, and only available for 5 years. That's when the goods have to come out. Back on the foreign trade zone, when the good comes out of the foreign trade zone and enters the US market, it's dutiable, depending on what the product is substantially transformed or what. But if it's exported, zero. So obviously the foreign trade zones offer greater flexibility for duty deferral, but also zero duty on export. One trick under the customs bonded warehouse is if you enter a good into a customs bonded warehouse at 50% from Brazil, for example, and you store the goods without paying duty. If the tariff rate drops in 2 years, you can import it to the United States and pay the lower duty. So, I mean, there's a number of your customs brokers, your attorneys can figure out what kind of duty deferral mechanism that would be good for your specific product. TIBs can be used for commercial samples, temporary, to take orders on merchandise, as you know. And I think there's a caveat that it has to be either imported or exported within a year. So when you file an application with the Foreign Trade Zone Board to establish a zone, the staff actually publishes the application in the Federal Register, and there's comments, and there's a period. The Department of Commerce International Trade Administration is the primary authority, but Treasury and Customs are obviously part of the board. I hope that answers some of it.
Yeah, it does. So what AGTA is going to do when we discovered this, and Frank is the one that discovered it, is, for example, we have 18 members in this building that are technically eligible for the free trade zone. We understand that the GIA building I don't know if it's confirmed yet, is also a free trade zone. So what we're asking is we have one AGTA member that's volunteered to be the test case for us. We're going to make application for the designation, and then we're going to go through the process of importing some goods, I think, from Thailand, and we're going to see how it all works. And then we're going to then have a real world. It took this many weeks to do this many days. And then what we're going to do is, of course, we're going to share it, not only with our AGTA members, but our brothers in the diamond business. We're going to share it with everybody, but we're going to do this test case, and we're going to sponsor it so we can see if it actually is something that can work. Now, unfortunately, if you're not in a free trade zone, it doesn't help you. But what we're trying to do is find different ways to mitigate things where possibly different AGTA members can work together. Our goal is to eliminate the tariff, but we have to somehow exist until we get to that point. So we are looking, and there'll be some other things talked about as we get on to the questioning. But that's something that we're doing that was just decided this morning. Okay. So our next question will go to Malca. And these questions, a lot of them came from our members. And some are simple, some are complex. It's a very simple one, the first one. Does the importer get billed directly or through the courier?
Right, so there are essentially both options. One is that our broker would issue the invoice for the tariff and the duties. And the other option is if you're on direct ACH with customs, we would issue the entry, and you would get billed by customs every 15th of the month, I believe.
Another question by a member. Is Malca-Amit planning to alter their own rates in order to enforce the new tariff regulations?
No. So the answer is no. We're just enforcing the CBP guidelines. We're passing on those tariffs directly to you guys.
Okay. All right, thank you. We're now going to have a couple questions for Roland. We're kind of going to move back and forth. Roland, since April 2nd, the April 2nd tariff announcement, please give your opinion on how the change has affected jewelry manufacturing, foreign and U.S. manufacturers in general, but not your company.
I think, the industry was shaken up. It's changed everything because all of a sudden you have these gigantic tariffs, especially let's say China, they imposed in the beginning, I think 150% tariffs, puts everybody out of business. You cannot manufacture something, pay 150% tariffs and try to sell it then in the US. So I think this really was a gigantic wake-up call for everybody in the industry.
So, again, since April 2nd, now we're going to ask you to get a little personal. How has the tariffs affected your personal business, since you are probably the largest manufacturer in New York at 17,000 square feet? How has it affected your business?
So, as a US manufacturer, it does exactly what Trump wants to do. He wants to bring work back to the United States. That's what it does for me. Since April 2nd, we have inquiries like crazy from companies who manufactured in China, manufacture in Thailand. They all now approached us and said, can you manufacture for us in the United States? So the tariffs for a US-based manufacturer does exactly what they're supposed to do. They bring back work to the United States. So for me, my business is booming. So that's the best thing that ever happened.
Okay. Well, in all this, there are winners and losers,
Yeah.
and that unfortunately, but we're just trying to get information out. So thank you. At this point, I'm going to go back to Malca-Amit, and this is a very serious question for a lot of AGTA members. When a U.S. company exports rough, unworked, or roughly shaped colored gemstone material to a foreign country to be cut and polished, upon return, the value declared should be based on the value of the finished goods or on the cost of labor processing the material.
Right. So now we're talking about guidelines for CBP for importing goods into the U.S. And CBP requires that the invoice is reflecting the actual value of the goods. They're not asking for an invoice for the value of the production costs. They need to see the value of what the goods are, and based on that, the tariff and the duties will be applied.
And that would be because the material has been substantially transformed.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Next question. Are goods that are imported in the U.S. for transit, they would be turned around and exported to a third overseas destination exempt from these new tariffs?
Yes, so if we're doing i.e. immediate export, and goods are coming into the U.S., they're not actually being imported into the U.S., they're then being transmitted to a third country, and they will not have any tariff or any duty. They're just transferring through the U.S. to the next final destination.
Why would the import here though?
Sometimes you'll have overseas shippers import it bring it into the U.S., not entering it, changing the paperwork to then move it around, like switching an invoice. The value can't change, but it's just like the shipper is now changing it to a final destination.
Okay. The next question. Are the tariffs collected on gemstones based on origin of mining, country of manufacturing, place where treatment and cutting is done, or the port of export?
So based on the information that we have and that we know that is being assessed, and the country of origin is where it's actually cut. So where it's manufactured, where it's cut, not where it's being mined. I know that there was talks maybe months ago about trying to enforce the country of mining, but as of now, the country of origin is based on where it was manufactured, or cut.
I have a question.
Sure.
The last,
If you could just speak up so we can get you on the microphone.
would it be possible to import, say from Thailand, to Malca's office from our supplier, and we come and change the paperwork and ship directly to our customer, say in Europe, without having to pay, except whatever duty they have to pay for, say, Thailand in the destination country?
It's kind of tricky. The only way to really do that in our office is if you're doing an inspection. So if some of you are familiar with what a Malca-Amit inspection is, so it has to be controlled by the foreign shipper. So you can't change any paperwork. You can come and inspect it, and there's a question about that I could explain a little bit more, but basically you'll come and inspect it in our office, and then the goods will have to return to the origin. There's no altering the invoice whatsoever.
It's my understanding that the TIB/Carnet system that was referred to a little bit earlier is only in place now for trade shows or laboratories. Can you elaborate on that?
So I could say that we're working on forming a plan to have the TIB available more for samples for order taking and for processing. So essentially, up until April, loose stones were not dutable. We didn't have to have this case, and we're now trying to look into solutions treating it same as what we would do with the jewelry for TIBs. As of now, it's going to be for trade shows and for inspections, but hopefully we'll have soon some more information that we could share out.
So that is true right now.
Right now, it would be for trade shows and inspections. Yes.
And one more, if I may, you mentioned something correct. That's not geographically available raw materials. So how would you respond to somebody that would then say, to Roland's point, great, the raw material is not geographically available, so you know what? We're not going to tariff the raw material, but we'd like you guys to just cut them here and do work here. That's what Mr. Trump would like to do. So how would you respond to that as a parry to that argument?
Well, first of all, kudos to Krainz Creations. And what we are trying to educate the Congress on and advocate is that this affects the gemstone supply chain. It disrupts it. Heretofore, 0 tariffs. Now, 35%, 19%, 15%. How do you deal with the European Union when gemstones go in at 0? You talk about the reverse effect for the loose color gemstone market. It gives Europe a competitive advantage over the United States. So the not geologically present is one facet of our argument. We believe it's an important one because they're just not plain available here, and they require AGTA members to import at whatever the tariff rate's going to be on August 1st. The supply chain is drastically affected. I'll leave it at that note. I don't know if that clarifies it for you. But
I mean, Stuart, how I've answered that to Senator Cruz when he asked that is simply if we imported the goods, say from Kenya, I'll pick a clean 10% tariff, we would pay the 10% on the rough, but the industry to cut those goods does not exist in the United States. So the goods have to be sent overseas. An example is the Montana sapphire. They have to be cut overseas because that industry to cut that melee, et cetera, doesn't exist here. To cut that where it would be economical in the market. It does not exist. And so that's our response specifically to the cutting portion that deals with that question, and we have been asked that question. It doesn't exist. Okay, well, we now have an interesting question for Roland. When a raw casting and precious metal, along with the loose polished gemstones, including diamonds or colored gemstones, are sent to an overseas jewelry manufacturer for finishing and setting, what portion of the value of the shipment is subject to tariffs? Is it at labor only or other?
Okay, we are in a very unique position. So we have a US-based manufacturing company, but I also own a 200,000 square foot facility in mainland China where we manufacture. So the product we purchase recycled platinum in the United States. The product starts in the United States, gets shipped to Hong Kong, enters into China. Whatever goes into China has to come back out. So all the raw materials are being shipped over there. The only thing we pay is the tariff tax on labor performed over there. So
Are they going over a cast form, or are they going over as like bullion, like a
not cast form. So
has to be cast form, correct?
cast
Has to be
form. So it's
substantial
already a ring. It's already
Okay.
part of a necklace, and it's being shipped over and worked on it over there.
Are diamonds included in those as well?
We can ship
So you're sending the
stones.
loose diamonds, the loose stones, and the castings over, and you're
Yeah.
only paying duty on the labor.
Yes.
Okay, the next question, this will go to Malca. Some of these questions are a bit repetitive, but they're from different members. How could merchandise be brought into the U.S. for examination? Would the tariff charge be credited if the goods are returned?
Right, so for examination, what I briefly mentioned before is for inspection. So we could bring the goods under a TIB, a temporary import bond, into our office for an inspection. The tariff will not be charged, so it won't need to be credited. We will do a temporary import bond after the examination, inspection. The goods would need to return back to the country of origin, and the TIB would be closed.
Can you just elaborate on what the process is for the temporary inspection? Like how long you have to inspect it? And
When we're doing an inspection, it's normally for like 1 or 2 inspections. So you're coming to view it in the office. The shipper who controls the item gives us the instructions of who's going to come and view it. After that, the goods need to be returned back. Generally speaking, the TIB, once open, can be open for 1 year in the U.S. But after an inspection, the goods would need to ship immediately
so they
back
can
to
be sitting there for a year, up to a year before they inspect it, basically.
Essentially, yes.
And it's under bond, which is a guarantee for the exporter, the sending it back out.
Hey, you have a question on this?
So the bond, does that cover that the product is sitting in their warehouse or actually at the end user?
At our warehouse. It cannot leave our warehouse.
So I couldn't show it to a customer and return it then?
Not in your office. It'll have to be in our designated room.
What we're working on AGTA, and we're actually working on this with a senior member of Congress, is an administrative customs rule that would make an easier process for the U.S. colored gemstone industry. Basically, it would allow U.S. colored gemstones to be imported with the duty being paid after the sale to a U.S. customer or no duty if they're exported. And that is what we're working on. Frank has kind of alluded to that, but that would hopefully make this easier. While we want to get rid of the tariffs, we also have to live with them while they're here. That just kind of follows what he's saying. So the next question is kind of interesting. This is from a member who has heard that other logistic companies are setting up free trade zones in which customers can come in and see stones before purchasing. The question is, how would this work? A little repetitive, but importantly, does Malca-Amit plan to offer this service?
Right, so it's already what we're doing now, and going back to the inspection service that we're offering, and the same thing, the goods would come into our office, which is the free trade zone. We would assess, you could come and view it, and after that 1 year, or when the inspection is done, the goods will be sent back out.
Okay.
And if I could just
Sure.
jump in, John, on this proposal that we're working with the senior member of Congress, this would be a brand new duty deferral program. And our pitch is that buyers of loose colored gemstones have to individually inspect the stone. And so, no pun intended, we're hoping for a carve out on our specific sector, which would defer the stones, defer duty on the stones, and for an in-person examination.
We went into quite detail describing the optical differences between colored gemstones and other gemstones as this is being worked on currently. Did you have a question?
I do. My question is, so I brought in, hi guys, sorry to walk in late. I've brought in goods with TIBs, I've brought in goods with carnets and different things, and the way it's been in the past, you have your bond, you put up your bond, and I know you have a free trade zone and all here, but you were able, so the TIB was for everything except for consumption, right? In the end, you couldn't sell the goods, but you could process goods, you could do different things while they were here, and if you ended up selling it, just like a carnet, you have your bond, they're gonna take tariffs from that. But has something changed where it can only enter now like the free zone and you can't take it out of the free zone to do different things? So you mentioned like laboratories. So I know I have a number of stones that came in from overseas that it's at the GIA currently, all right, with a TIB because it's gonna go back to the GIA for grading, but I have to do work on it before they can actually grade. So they're processing it, I have to pick it up, then return it to them, and they're being very accurate, as you well know, with getting all of this. They want to have it very controlled because they're responsible. But my question is, so it used to be able, we could bring it in and do what we needed to do and make sure we went to our customs broker. So I used Malca, and all the whole group, okay, and just return it. But it seems to have changed now. Is that what's happening, or?
So, as of now, we have to be very careful because things are changing. As of now, the goods that are entering for TIB, whether it is for certification or for viewing, the goods have to go out. We don't have a system now that we know of that you could sell off from that TIB before sending it out. Meaning, if you now want to inspect it, the goods came in for an inspection, you're now interested and you want to purchase it, it has to go back to the country that it was shipped from. Then you could re-import it and pay the duty on that.
So it's more like a carnet.
It seems like, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, a carnet
It has to go back out.
It has to go back out.
Yeah.
I could say that sometimes you could sell in the U.S. under a carnet and you'll get whatever it is, the fine in another year when you close the carnet.
Well, that was the problem with the carnet, right? If you sold it on a TIB, it's one thing, but if you sold it on a carnet, you'd get a fine plus the tariff.
Right.
All right, thank you.
That's the main reason we're trying to work on this administrative rule for the industry. We have another question for Malcolm. Surprising, huh?
Sure.
This is from an AGTA member in Canada. I'm an AGTA member in Canada, and I exhibit at the AGTA Tucson Gem Show. I ship my goods into the United States for the show, and then I ship back my unsold goods back to Canada. I need to know how the current change in tariffs has changed since the process I used before April 2nd, 2025. In other words, this person exhibited at our Tucson show this year in February. They're coming back next February. They want to know how things have changed as of this day. That's a kind of a hard question, I know.
It's a good question. So, one, if we have to kind of split into two. One, if we're talking about goods that were manufactured in Canada and maybe fall, just like you mentioned, Frank, about the U.S., Mexico, and Canada Free Trade Agreement. If by when the show is going to happen, if the tariffs are still here and this the USMCA goods will still be duty and tariff free, then you have no problems. You bring it into the show, you just have to qualify for the USMCA, and no issue. If not, and they're not manufactured in Canada, We could look into the TIB option. We did TIB for Vegas shows. We believe we're going to do the same thing also for Tucson. And the third best option is Carnet. So those are the options.
I didn't hear the third option, sorry.
Carnet.
Carnet.
Yes.
I was banging on the back of my head.
So we're advising all our Canadian members that ship in for our shows to get with shippers early, customs house brokers, avoid any confusion.
Yes, and I think, if I just can add for any questions that you have about shipping, logistics, especially, now we're talking again about On-Time show coming up and other shows, and we want to be prepared for the winter shows. And we're always available to answer all your questions as best as we can. If we can't answer, we'll refer you to our broker. We'll always work for you. We see ourselves as a strategic partner for the AGTA. So we're here to help.
And we appreciate you coming and Malca participating in this to help educate our members and help our members. We have one more question for you. It's from an AGTA member who sends memorandum goods to Europe. What is the process for sending goods out of the U.S. and the hurdles of re-importing the goods and not being subject to the tariff currently versus before April 2nd?
Okay, so to that extent, there's no real change if you have goods that were originally imported into the U.S. And now you're sending them out and you plan to bring them back in. So you generally have 3 years, up to 3 years, to re-import goods that were imported into the U.S. You're now exporting it. You have 3 years to bring these goods back, duty and tax free. We use what we call, some of you know this from the international shows that you go, that you ship with us, the Foreign Shipper Declaration and Importer Declaration. We use these two forms to re-import the goods into the U.S. duty and tax free.
A final question for Roland. Roland, what is your advice to U.S.-based jewelry manufacturers, whether it be an individual goldsmith that may have these challenges or a large company concerning the new tariffs?
Again, if they're US-based and manufacture for the US, they have no issue. It's more for gem dealers who look for a manufacturer to produce jewelry. So again, if they use a US-based, very easy. If they have to go overseas, they have to make sure that they work with the right manufacturer who follows the correct steps of bringing it back into the United States, that they get the best possible deal out of it.
Okay. Mark, you had a question.
It's more of a statement. If the new administration came in, and bearing in mind in 2024 we imported $3.29 trillion approximately in goods, assuming a baseline just a 10% tariff, just to simplify this, that'd be $329 billion in tariffs. The next administration comes and says, oh, we're going to throw that out. Where would they come up with a shortfall of $329 billion, which is already spent, because it's a deficit? So it's not an easy line just to say we're going to throw it out. Once Congress is dealing with a $329 billion shortfall on a lot of assumptions, it's going to be a hard one to get rid of.
You're exactly right, and I think I alluded to that by saying that this is fundamentally a revenue problem, budgetary revenue problem. And
I just wanted people here to volume the numbers.
Right,
When people think of money, they think millions. No, you think of $250 billion of revenue.
well, think about 15% from Japan alone, starting on August 1st.
Benny?
Yeah.
Speak up, Benny.
Another statement. My feeling is that the approach, with all due respect, should be towards exemptions, because the situation is very fluid. It changes on a dime in a minute, and with the back and forth and retaliations. Our argument should be that this creates employment, and we don't have this material in the U.S. Okay, that should be the primary argument with the administration. If they do care about employment and creating jobs here, we're here to help.
Well, Benny, the first letter was personally delivered to President Trump by Randy Weber of Texas to the White House on Monday. And the board of directors of AGTA has a copy of that letter. And exactly, we're not going to give out what's in the letter, but primarily it stressed all those points you raised and more. But what we're trying to do is we're fighting on several different mechanisms to avoid the tariff, whether it be an exemption under an executive order or they don't like the word exclusion, but however we can get rid of the tariffs, that is our number one priority. And then at the same time, because there is no one else in the industry working on this, we're trying to find ways to live while we're waiting for that, because y'all have to get memo merchandising. You have to be able to inspect things. You have to be able to ship. So our goal is to eliminate those tariffs, but we also have to keep our eye on the ball, because we might be cooking a great meal for 2 months from now, but we all got to eat between now and then. So we're doing both things. But the letters are on his desk, and like, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, we expect by the end of the month to be about 25 letters from members of Congress and senators on his desk specifically dealing with AGTA. And then we will go back and we will start meeting with people in the administration, Bruce Bridges and I, in September. We already have a trip planned and they're already setting up appointments for us. So that is our number one goal. But you know, we have that goal, but we also have to make sure we protect our members in the meantime. So we're just trying to do the best we can. And being in Washington, I've been there, I think, 16 days since April 2nd. Bruce has had 2 very long trips. We go from 8 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. I can't tell you how many senators and congressmen. Everybody knows who AGTA is now. We meet with Republicans and we meet with Democrats. And we are talking to everyone. But the people that are writing the letters for us are senior members of the Republican caucus, both in the House and the Senate. And it's going fairly well.
Yes, very well, thanks to John's leadership. But I would say our first line, we're making the case that we would, the Gem Association, tariff exemption for the loose color gemstone. We kind of modified that argument in the last couple of weeks to give an additional line of argument added to critical minerals exemption, which is in law. It's also an annex. So the answer to your question is yes.
Just so you know, I personally handed the USTR assistant, Trump's number 2 Trump, a trade person, a very, very, I shouldn't say their name, a copy of the countries that we import from because they wanted it. They also know, and it was done, the minerals descriptions of the stones that all our members import. They have that too. We're trying 2 different mechanisms to get to the same point so that we have a result of a 0 tariff. So that's what we're working on. Jeff Bilgore.
I thank you guys for doing a great job. Thank you for your presentation. Aside from the jobs issue, I'm sure the reciprocal tariff concept, we are net exporters of goods. So we import the goods and add value and export, which creates jobs and creates revenue. In terms of the concept that's been put to the nation of reciprocal tariffs to increase revenue, this is going to hurt revenue and not increase it. So I hope that's the 2-time that you are working on. I'm pretty sure it is, but I just wanted to articulate it. So that
it is the one thing that distinguishes us from every other sector in the industry. We are a net exporter. And we tell them we're a net exporter.
We're 1,100 members that add value to every product.
And yes, and we've had to teach them what the difference is between a diamond and colored gemstones, and we had to give them the harmonized codes. It's been an education process, and now we're trying to get it into an implementation process.
But you're exactly right about jobs.
The argument.
We lead with the fact that these reciprocal and baseline 10% tariffs are affecting jobs of your 1,100 members. That's the first issue. And it's jobs through disruption of the supply chain, 10%, 40%. And second argument is it's going to offshore the industry to Europe. So, good points.
What are tariff drawbacks as it related to loose-colored gemstones tariffs being paid when imported to the U.S. and then exported? The U.S. Customs procedure of duty drawback is a tool for the importing community to reduce costs and increase competitiveness. Drawback is a refund of duties, taxes, and fees paid on imported merchandise that are later exported or destroyed. It allows businesses to recover a portion of their importing cost, and would apply to loose-colored gemstones as an ordinary import if duties are assessed and paid upon entry. All claims for drawback must now be filed electronically with the CPP through the Automated Broker Interface, ABI. Claimants can purchase special software through a customs-approved vendor to prepare and submit a claim. There are specific requirements for submitting supporting documentation, such as a bill of lading, invoices, and proof of export. More detailed information on the drawback process can be found at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection website. How temporary would the tariffs be? Could a new administration dispose of these tariffs just as easily? Since these tariffs were imposed unilaterally by President Trump and not by an act of Congress, they can always be changed by another executive order. As mentioned earlier, a federal appeals court is also weighing a challenge to the president's authority to impose tariffs with the case and is likely to wind up before the Supreme Court, further contributing to their temporary nature. Further, Trump's tariffs have been already delayed several times, although he recently stated that his new deadline of August 1 is final. If specific trading partners were to increase foreign investment in the U.S. or take other steps that appease the Trump administration, he could make further changes to tariff rates. Depending on the outcome of these court cases, a new administration would have to operate under the tariff authorities prescribed by the court. Of course, no one can predict trade policy in 3.5 years from now, but American industry, retailers, and consumers will continue to raise concerns for changes during this time, and Congress may reassert its traditional role in this space. But a new administration should be able to reduce or eliminate duty tariff rates, depending, of course, on whether any FTAs were implemented into statute by Congress. Could these charges be retroactively refunded to U.S. importers by a new administrator? As to retroactive refunds in a new administration, it is doubtful this will happen, but the outcome of the court challenge may provide insight, and Treasury may have to seek budgetary authority from Congress to spend that money. Also, as I mentioned, a class action lawsuit has been filed in the Court of International Trade to recover tariff payments made after its ruling that Trump tariffs were invalid. Basically, it is a claim against the United States for a refund of duties paid by importers.
So any AGTA member that's watching this, if you have any issue on tariffs, if you will send it to me, John, at agta.org, we will try to get it addressed for you and responded to privately. If it's an issue that has to be referred to a customs house broker, we'll help you find one if you don't. We thank you for listening to this. We hope it's been worthwhile, and we hope we're doing our job for our members and also for the industry.